Alright, so why do the gymnastics ring specialists have really big arms? There's a lot of theories for this. First of all, there's a lot of straight arm bicep strength that you need in order to hold yourself up in the planche and the Maltese and the iron cross. Especially the Maltese, I'd imagine. But the problem with just emulating these exercises is that you need to be a pretty advanced athlete to do all of this. To get into a position where your arms are being activated a lot, it requires a lot of balance, body control, flexibility, and mobility. Unless you can get yourself into these positions, you're not going to get that crazy intense bicep pump. Like, for example, a tucked planche will barely work on your arms, whereas a full Maltese will get your bicep under intense stress. If you just think about the leverages, right? There is exponentially more stress on your biceps the more you stretch out your arms and get into the position of a Maltese. Even if you do an assisted full Maltese, it works on your biceps a lot more than a tucked planche, for example, again, ever could. Your biceps are carrying much more of your weight proportionally, and they're much more stretched as well. What's also important is that they don't just do static moves either. A gymnast's routine works several ranges of motion. You see them go through all those circuits on the gymnastics rings routines. Like, you see they go into a position for 2 seconds and then they move on to another. This is why I think, for example, calisthenics athletes don't have overpowering arms when gymnasts do. Calisthenics is more focused on static skill acquisition, whereas gymnastics is focused, like, they work more through emotion. At least when it comes to the more advanced skills, like I mentioned, planche, Maltese, and iron cross. Much more likely to incorporate those movements with another type of motion. Another important thing to notice is their hand placement. Oftentimes their hands are more supinated, whereas calisthenics athletes have their hands in a more neutral position. This puts exponentially more stress on your biceps. Just look at a parallel Maltese or straddle planche when compared to a rings Maltese or straddle planche. You can see the biceps are much more flexed than the latter. Gymnasts also work on more advanced movements more often, like I was talking about with the tucked planche. They don't really do tucked planches at all, really. They don't do easier variations of an exercise. They just do the hard variation of the exercise with more support. Like, for example, they're not going to really do tucked planche, but they're just going to be doing straddle planche with like someone helping to support their hips up. Now, obviously you can get some big arms with calisthenics, but that simply doesn't compare to what you see in gymnastics. And what's also important to note is, the straight arm strength. I don't think there's another sport or another discipline that incorporates straight arm strength. Certainly not to the degree that gymnasts do. That, along with the stabilization, I'm sure that plays a major role. I'm not saying these are the only reasons, but these are just the reasons that I noticed that are most likely contributing to their massive bicep size. And that's because of the way they train them. I think they train them in a very special and a very good way. But again, it's very hard for people to actually train them like this because most people can't actually get into those positions. One more thing to note, actually, since I know some people are going to say this, there are some confounding variables. Like, gymnasts are usually shorter. The average height for a gymnast is like 5'3" or something. Also, not every gymnast is super jacked. Like, you could look at some gymnast medal holders who don't have like crazy large biceps. They're still like relatively huge, but they're not like crazy big. The one guy everyone mentions when they talk about like huge gymnastics athletes, gymnastics ring specialists, is Arthur Zanetti, I believe. He's kind of an anomaly even within the people I looked up. But still, it is consistent that their arms and shoulders are relatively bigger than all their other body parts, and are still clearly bigger proportionally to all the other body parts. Still bigger than, for example, calisthenics athletes. And again, just to remind you, I think this is because of the fact that they use a lot of supinated motions with the rings, so their arms are in like a bicep curling sort of like tilted outwards sort of motion, and they work through a range of movement. The rings are also unstable, making them have to work on their stabilizing muscles more, and all that other good stuff.